You sit before me today with the quiet tension of those who have lived too long in the territory between the seen and the unseen. Those who feel the undercurrents of life more sharply than others. Those who have been told, sometimes gently, sometimes cruelly, that their sensitivity is a flaw, a weakness, a fracture in the armor required to survive the modern world. Yet, let me begin by telling you something that has taken many years of studying the unconscious, many years of listening to the dreams of humanity, many years of watching the soul try to speak through the noise of the ego. You are not weak. You have never been weak. You are simply wide open. And being open in a world addicted to self-numbing is a radical act of courage. Most people walk through life with their inner doors bolted shut. They do not see, they do not hear, they do not feel, they do not dare to let the world touch them, penetrate them, change them. They bury themselves behind the persona, behind the mask that says, I am thin, I am strong, I am unaffected, while inside the unconscious festers like an unlit cavern full of forgotten truths and unsolved wounds. But you, the sensitive soul, the receptive one, the empath, you were born without this fortress. You were born with the doors unlocked, the windows unguarded, the inner world exposed to every subtle tremor around you. You do not merely observe life, you absorb it. You do not simply witness emotion, you metabolize it. And it is precisely because you live with this permeability that you have spent so many years wondering whether something is wrong with you. People misunderstand sensitivity. They confuse depth with fragility, openness with instability, receptivity with helplessness. They forget that the most powerful instruments in existence, the finely tuned violin, the delicate antenna, the astronomer's polished lens, are all sensitive objects. They are powerful because they are sensitive. They perceive what the crude tools cannot. They detect what the ordinary senses overlook, and so do you. You walk into a room and feel the tension before a word is spoken. You sense deceit in the subtle shift of a tone. You empathize with suffering that others dismiss as dramatic or exaggerated. You connect threads of meaning that others cannot see. You live with an inner ear that hears the unspoken, an inner eye that perceives the invisible. But there is a cost to this gift. There is always a cost. The unconscious never grants a psychic function without demanding something in return. The price you pay is overwhelm, exhaustion, vulnerability to the projections and manipulations of others. If you do not understand your gift, if you do not honor it, if you do not learn to anchor yourself in the self rather than the surrounding emotional climate, then your openness becomes a wound rather than a channel. You become porous in a world built on psychic armor. You carry emotional burdens that do not belong to you. You mistake other people's shadows for your responsibilities. You begin to think, I am weak, when in truth You are drowning in the waters that others refuse to even acknowledge. You must understand, psychic sensitivity is not a defect in the personality, but a function of the unconscious attempting to communicate with the conscious mind. Sensitivity is the soul's antenna, the organ through which the deeper layers of reality speak. To be sensitive is to be in dialogue with the invisible. It is to be in conversation with the primordial forces that shape the psyche. When you dream vividly, when you intuit the truth without evidence, when you sense the hidden motives of others, when you feel the ancient wounds of the collective, you are not malfunctioning, you are listening, and the world grows uncomfortable around those who listen too well. Throughout history, sensitive souls were recognized as healers, shamans, mystics, the ones who could wander into the forest alone and return with wisdom no ordinary person could access, but modern society does not revere them. It pathologizes them, it medicates them, it calls them anxious, dramatic, overly emotional, too much. What they call too much is simply more than they can understand. You are not too much. You are the exact proportion required to perceive the truth that the unconscious cannot shout loudly enough for the rest of humanity to hear. But let me share something deeper with you, something I have witnessed in every deeply sensitive person who has crossed my path. Sensitivity without self-knowledge becomes self-destruction. If you do not know where you end and others begin, if you do not learn the boundaries of your psychic structure, your openness becomes a doorway through which the shadows of others enter unchecked. Every sensitive soul must learn one central truth. You cannot heal the world by absorbing its suffering. You cannot bring light to others by extinguishing your own. If your openness is not paired with discernment, you become a vessel for the projections of those who fear their own depths. And believe me, many people fear their depths more than they fear death itself. Let me tell you a story, a dream that someone once brought to me, a dream that belongs not only to that individual, but to all sensitive souls. In the dream, they walked through a vast forest under a darkening sky. Between the trees, they saw small, flickering lights, like the lanterns of wandering spirits. When they approached one of the lights, it dimmed. When they touched another, it extinguished entirely. And as they continued, they realized the forest grew darker with each step they took, as if their mere presence was stealing the light from the world. They woke up terrified, thinking, I am a destroyer. My sensitivity harms others. But the dream did not mean this at all. The dream meant that they were entering a phase of life where their openness required maturation. They were touching other people's wounded lights, but instead of illuminating them, they were absorbing their dimness. The dream was a warning. Do not confuse empathy with enmeshment. Do not carry shadows that do not belong to you. Do not mistake the dimming of another's light as proof that you are inherently harmful. Sensitive souls often take responsibility for the darkness around them. But this responsibility is not noble. It is a distortion of empathy, a collapse of boundaries, a confusion of energies that leads the sensitive person into burnout, despair, and self-blame. But here is the truth. Buried beneath this confusion, you are not someone who dims the world. You are someone who notices the dimness that others fail to see. You are not someone who absorbs shadows. You are someone who recognizes them. But if you mistake perception for ownership, then your gift becomes a chain. Sensitivity is the psyche's way of saying, there are things here that must be integrated. You are wide open because something within you still remembers the ancient language of the soul, a language that most have forgotten. You still feel the archetypes moving within you, the wounded healer, the visionary, the hermit, the child, the shadow, the sage. These forces are not metaphors, they are psychological realities, primordial structures that live in the collective unconscious and speak through dreams, intuition, and emotional resonance. When an archetype rises within you, it overwhelms the ego with a sense of meaning or dread or fascination. Most people suppress this activation. They distract themselves. They numb themselves. They drown the archetype in noise. But you cannot. Your openness makes you a natural vessel for archetypal experience. You feel the stirrings of the unconscious long before they erupt into consciousness. You sense the collective field through your body. You walk with one foot in the visible world and one in the invisible, and yet, because of this, you have also suffered. You have been misunderstood, exploited, judged, envied, dismissed. Sensitive souls are often born into families where their gifts are not recognized but attacked, because their openness threatens the closed systems around them. You may have grown up being told that your feelings were exaggerated, that your intuition was irrational, that your perceptions were paranoid, that your crying was weakness, that your silence was avoidance. You may have been punished for noticing too much, for sensing the tension that others denied, for speaking truths that made people uncomfortable, and over time you began to mistrust yourself. You began to doubt the validity of your own experience. You began to think, maybe I am too sensitive. But you were never too sensitive. You were simply born into an environment that feared sensitivity. Let me tell you something essential. The child who sees too much becomes the adult who feels too much, and the adult who feels too much becomes the soul who is called to transform their sensitivity into consciousness. Your sensitivity is a summons, a call to individuation. It demands that you step out of the collective trance and enter your own depths. Sensitive souls do not have the luxury of living on the surface. You are pushed downward, inward, into the psyche, because that is where your strength lies. You cannot survive life by ignoring your inner world. You must journey through it. Imagine the psyche as a great house. Most people live only in the brightly lit rooms. The persona, the identity, the social mask, but you have been wandering the corridors at night, sensing the voices behind locked doors, hearing footsteps in the attic, feeling the presence of forgotten stories in the basement. This is not because you are unstable, it is because you are attuned to the totality of the psyche. You are not afraid of darkness. You simply do not know yet how to navigate it. And the first step of this navigation is to stop believing that darkness is a sign of weakness. Darkness is simply the part of yourself you have not yet met, the part you have abandoned or repressed or judged when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel too open, when you feel invaded by energies that are not yours. This is not a flaw, it is a signal. The psyche is saying, there is something here that must be integrated. You must learn to differentiate between what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Sensitive souls often mistake resonance for responsibility. If someone's suffering stirs something inside you, you assume that it is now yours to solve. If someone's anger affects your body, you assume that you have done something wrong. If someone's silence feels heavy, you assume it is your job to break it. But this is the great illusion of the sensitive psyche. You are not meant to solve everything you feel. You are not meant to carry everything you notice. You are not meant to absorb every emotional vibration around you. Your openness is not a task, it is a perceptual field. It shows you what exists. It does not demand that you fix it. The world needs sensitive souls, not because they will heal everyone, but because they perceive what others deny. You are the torchbearers of the unconscious, the ones who notice when the collective psyche is shifting, the first to sense when a storm is coming, the first to feel when something sacred is trying to emerge. But to fulfill this role, you must learn another lesson. Sensitivity is only a gift when it is rooted in the self. If you stay rooted in the ego, the sensitivity becomes chaos. The ego cannot handle that much information, that much emotion, that much perception. It collapses, it panics, it over-identifies, it tries to control. Only the self, the deep center of the psyche, can hold the full magnitude of your openness. Only the self can filter what enters and what must be released. And so I tell you now, you must stop believing that your sensitivity is a weakness. It is your initiation. It is your path. It is the door through which you will meet your true self. If you wish to understand why you feel so exposed in this world, you must first understand that sensitivity is not simply a psychological characteristic, it is an existential orientation. Sensitive souls inhabit the world differently. Others walk across the surface of life from moment to moment, task to task, identity to identity, as if walking across frozen ground. But you walk as though the ice beneath you is thin, as though each step might crack the barrier separating you from the depths. You feel the water moving beneath the surface. You sense the unseen currents. You hear the echoes rising from the unconscious. This is why your relationships feel more intense, why your emotions feel more consequential, why your solitude holds both terror and revelation. You do not live in one layer of existence. You live in many at once. This is not a weakness. It is a calling, yet being this open means that every wound you have ever encountered, every experience you have held inside, every shadow you have inherited from others, continues to move within you long after the moment has passed. Sensitive souls do not simply experience life, they reverberate with it. The psyche of the sensitive person is like a resonant chamber. The sound does not stop when the moment stops. It lingers, it transforms, it asks for integration. And because this inner resonance is constant, because it merges with the collective field, because it absorbs what others refuse to feel, you often find yourself overwhelmed by emotions that do not belong solely to you. I have seen this pattern in countless individuals who possess your kind of depth. They come into my consulting room not because they are sick, but because they are carrying too much of the world within them. They speak as though they are confused by their own intensity, as though their inner life is too vast, too fluid, too uncontainable. Yet, the truth is simpler. Their containers were never designed for smallness. Their souls were never crafted for superficiality. Their psyches were built with doors instead of walls, windows instead of shields, antennas instead of blinders. And when these individuals try to live as though they were meant to be closed, they suffer. To deny the openness of your nature is to fracture yourself, to split your inner world into fragmented parts that fight for dominance. What most sensitive souls do not realize is that the unconscious actively seeks openness. It does not want you to retreat into the narrow hallways of the persona. It does not want you to adopt the armor of society. It wants you to retrieve what has been forgotten, to illuminate what has been hidden, to integrate what has been rejected. This requires vulnerability, but vulnerability is not the same as helplessness. Vulnerability is a transparency of the psyche. Helplessness is a loss of contact with the self. You must learn to distinguish between the two. When you are connected to the self, your openness becomes luminous. When you are disconnected from the self, your openness becomes chaotic. Let me explain this through a symbol that has appeared in the dreams of many sensitive individuals, the image of the open gate. In these dreams, the dreamer finds themselves standing before a gate that leads into a dark forest or into a vast field or into a forgotten city. The gate is unlocked. It swings open easily. There is no guard, no barrier, no warning. The dreamer feels both curiosity and fear. They know the gate leads into the unknown. They know that beyond it lies something transformative or overwhelming or sacred. Often the dreamer hesitates. They look behind them, hoping someone will accompany them. But there is no one. The dream is always the same, an open gate that must be crossed alone. This gate symbolizes the threshold of the unconscious. Sensitive souls live near this threshold. They do not dwell entirely in the conscious mind. Their dreams are closer to the surface, their instincts stronger, their intuitions more vivid, their unconscious material more fluid. Most people avoid this gate. They build their entire lives around not approaching it. They distract themselves with noise, relationships, ambition, status, and rationality in order to maintain their distance, but you were born at the gate. You were born with the threshold inside you. You have crossed it unknowingly many times through intuition, emotion, empathy, imagination, conflict, heartbreak. And every time you cross, you gather symbols that your ego does not yet understand. This is why the world feels so intense to you. You are not experiencing life from the ego alone. You are experiencing it through the entire psyche. You feel the archetypes shifting inside you. You sense the collective emotions of others. You perceive the symbolic meanings that underlie ordinary events, and all of this occurs simultaneously. It is not weakness that makes your inner life so overwhelming. It is scale. You are navigating a psychic landscape much larger than the one most people inhabit. Your task, therefore, is not to toughen yourself or shrink yourself or numb yourself. Your task is to become conscious of the immensity within you, to develop a relationship with the unconscious that is not fear-based, but collaborative. If you do not do this, if you try to live as though you are small, ordinary, impermeable, your sensitivity will turn inward and attack you. It will transform into anxiety, into self-doubt, into compulsive overthinking, into emotional exhaustion, into a sense that you are defective. But these symptoms are not defects. They are the psyche's protests. They are signals that you are living contrary to your nature. They are messages from the unconscious urging you to widen your relationship with yourself. Many sensitive souls have been taught to fear their own depths. They have been punished for their perceptions. They have been told that their intuition is irrational, that their emotions are overblown, that their clarity is delusion, that their needs are inconvenient. This conditioning creates what I call a fractured openness, a state in which the person is extremely sensitive, but deeply distrustful of their own sensitivity. They doubt their feelings, they question their instincts, they mistrust their intuition. They become internally divided, with one part of the psyche open and receptive, and another part suspicious and ashamed. This internal division is what creates emotional turmoil, not the sensitivity itself. To heal this fracture, you must return to a truth you abandoned. Long ago, the truth that your perceptions are valid, not always accurate. No human perception is infallible, but they are valid. They arise from genuine psychic material. They reflect real processes occurring within you and around you. They speak in the language of emotion, intuition, symbol, and resonance. And if you learn to listen to this language without fear, you will no longer feel overwhelmed by it. Sensitivity becomes overwhelming only when it is combined with self-doubt. When you remove the doubt, the sensitivity becomes guidance. But let me speak to another dimension of this experience, one that many sensitive souls know but rarely articulate: the loneliness of being wide open. When you perceive what others cannot, when you feel what others ignore, when you sense the truth behind the mask, you often feel isolated. You feel like an outsider in a world that worships superficial certainty. You cannot fully join the collective because you can see through it. You cannot lose yourself in the persona because you see the cracks in your own mask. This creates an existential solitude, a sense that you are walking through life at a different frequency. This solitude is not a punishment, it is an initiation. Sensitive souls are not meant to follow the crowd. They are meant to step outside of it, observe it, reflect on it, and eventually transform their relationship with it. But before you can do any of this, you must learn to stand alone without collapsing inward. You must learn to differentiate solitude from abandonment. You must learn to see isolation not as a defect, but as a stage of psychic development. Every sensitive soul undergoes what I call the night sea journey. It is the descent into the unconscious that occurs when you can no longer tolerate the superficiality of the outer world. When your soul demands depth, even if your ego fears it. During this journey, you may feel lost, confused, overwhelmed by dreams, flooded by emotions, haunted by memories. But this journey is necessary. It is the way the psyche reorganizes itself. It is the way sensitivity becomes power. It is the way openness becomes clarity. Let me share another dream. A dream that marks the turning point of many sensitive individuals. In this dream, the dreamer stands by the edge of a vast sea at night. The water is dark and infinite. The moon reflects on the surface like a trembling eye. The dreamer feels a pull towards the water, a calling, a summons. They fear that entering the sea will drown them, that they will lose themselves in the depths. But behind them, the land is barren, dead, lifeless. The choice is clear: enter the sea or remain in a desert of their own making. And so they step into the water. This sea is the unconscious. The night represents the mystery. The fear represents the ego's resistance. But the sea is not here to drown the dreamer. It is here to initiate them. Sensitive souls must enter the sea. They must face their emotions, their ancestral wounds, their forgotten memories, their untamed intuitions, their inner symbols. They must confront the shadow, not to be consumed by it, but to reclaim the energy trapped within it. The shadow is not the dark part of you. It is the part of you that you have rejected because others could not accept it. Sensitive souls often place their power in the shadow. They banish their discernment, their anger, their intuition, their truth-telling, their independence into the unconscious, because these qualities threatened the people around them, but the psyche does not give up its treasures easily. If you banish your power, it will haunt you until you reclaim it. Many sensitive individuals confuse empathy with submission. They believe that to be kind is to be boundaryless, that to be understanding is to be self-sacrificing, that to be receptive is to be passive. This confusion is the result of a wounded archetype, the wounded healer. The wounded healer archetype calls you to heal others, but when the wound is unintegrated, you attempt to heal by sacrificing yourself. You confuse healing with disappearing, and in doing so, you lose your center. But the true healer does not lose themselves. The true healer stands firmly in their own self and offers presence, not absorption, guidance, not self-erasure, clarity, not collapse. When you heal the wounded healer within you, your sensitivity no longer makes you vulnerable to exploitation. You stop attracting those who drain you. You stop mistaking emotional chaos for connection. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You begin to gravitate toward people who meet you in depth rather than take advantage of your depth. Your relationships shift because your energy shifts. Sensitivity without boundaries attracts predators. Sensitivity with boundaries attracts equals. And so, my final message in this part is simple. You are not here to be overwhelmed by the world. You are here to perceive it. You are not here to be consumed by emotion. You are here to understand it. You are not here to be weakened by your openness. You are here to transform it into vision. When you learn to root your sensitivity in the self, the world no longer feels like a storm. It becomes a landscape you can navigate, a landscape you can understand, a landscape you were born to perceive. There comes a moment in the life of every sensitive soul when they can no longer ignore the truth that has been quietly forming within them, the truth that their suffering is not random but initiatory, that their openness is not a deficiency but a directive, that their sensitivity is not a burden but a compass pointing them towards the work they were born to do. But before this realization becomes clear, there is always a period of inner disorientation, a stage in which the sensitive person feels trapped between worlds, too aware to return to ignorance, yet not grounded enough to walk fully in their own truth. This in-between place is one of the most painful stages of individuation, because it demands that you confront your own contradictions. You wish for deep connection, yet you fear the intensity of your own emotional responses. You long to be understood, yet you hide the very parts of yourself that reveal your deepest truth. You desire boundary, yet you struggle to enforce them. You want to be free from the projections of others, yet you continue to absorb their unprocessed emotions. This tension is not a failure. It is the psyche stretching itself. You are being pulled beyond the limits of your old identity. The ego is attempting to cling to its familiar patterns, while the self is calling you into a wider field of consciousness. Sensitive souls often mistake this tension for brokenness. They believe something is wrong with them because their inner world feels so chaotic. But this chaos is necessary. It is the shaking of the inner walls, the loosening of the psychic structure, the cracking of old defenses that no longer serve your growth. The psyche must destabilize before it can reorganize at a higher level of integration. You are not unraveling, you are transforming, you are not collapsing, you are shedding, you are not losing control. You are relinquishing the false control that kept you trapped in patterns of self-betrayal. Let me tell you something. You may not yet fully believe the intensity of your emotional life is evidence of your depth, not your weakness. When the unconscious communicates, it does not whisper politely. It surges, it erupts, it floods the ego with images, emotions, instincts, dreams, impulses, memories. Sensitive individuals feel these movements more strongly because their inner barriers are thinner. They cannot compartmentalize as easily as others. They cannot repress without consequence. They cannot numb themselves without creating a psychic debt that must be paid later. This is why you feel so deeply. This is why you sense danger before it arrives.